All right, welcome back to the Cyber Talent Matrix. We're diving deep into season two, and today we're tackling the elephant in the room for every cyber and workforce leader: artificial intelligence. But we aren't talking about LLMs or automated SOCs, we're talking about the people driving them. Every organization has access to the same set of AI tools, which means AI has become the great equalizer. If everyone has the same tech, where does your competitive advantage come from? Well, it comes from original intelligence, or OI, the human ability to generate novel ideas, even when AI is doing the heavy thinking. I'm Jeff Welgan, joined by my co host, Dr. Sasha Vanterpool and Will Denman. Today, we are thrilled to welcome Jonathan Aberman, CEO of Hupside. Jonathan is a veteran investor, academic leader, and the visionary behind a platform that actually quantifies human originality. And full disclosure for everyone watching or listening, SkillRex is proud to be Hubside's first affiliate partner because we believe in measuring AI readiness, and that we know that is helping to define the next frontier of workforce intelligence. So, Jonathan, welcome to the Matrix.
Didn't sure like that. I definitely am happy to be among friends. Thanks for having me.
Oh, no, it's a pleasure to have you on. We've been excited to have you on the show. I wanted to just kind of give you a moment to real quick to kind of give us a little bit of background about you. Tell us a little bit about Hubside and how you came to start this company.
Geez, briefly, huh? Okay. I grew up in family businesses. My grandparents owned their own companies. I've always been interested in innovation and starting businesses, and I've been in the venture capital industry for a long time. I've helped start a lot of companies. Years ago, a mentor of mine said to me, Jonathan, your biggest challenge in your life is going to be you want to be good and you want to be rich. And how you balance that is going to be a large driver for how your life unfolds. And I thought at the time, being in my early 20s, he was full of crap. And I realized a long time later, he was right. And that's kind of how Upside happened. I was looking at for another investment. I had been starting technology companies as seed investor for a while. And I met these two scientists that said, we've got a technology that can identify what humans do that AI can't. And I couldn't imagine a more important technology for the current world that we're in than that. And so I went from interested in putting a deal together as an investor to deciding that I didn't want to leave the commercialization of this technology to anybody else other than myself. And I became a technology founder again. And we started Upside with the core technology. I brought in another experienced business founder, Eric Baumgartner, and we started to build technology around this core insight. 10 months later, we've got, our first commercial product in the marketplace that we're partnering with SkillRex and others. And that measures humans' ability to generate originality above and beyond AI, an absolute measurement. And we call that original intelligence. And we have in development, and we'll be releasing over the next 6 months, products that actually identify the inherent originality in a piece of content. And the mission behind all this is we don't think that the idea that AI on its own solves all problems. We just don't agree. We think a lot of well-meaning energy is going into running at AI because it can do a lot of things really well, but the one thing it can't do is differentiate because of the way that it creates sameness at scale. So in order to really benefit from AI as a society, we have to bring people back into the calculation. And what Hupside does is it provides a very clear ROI for why and how you can make that happen. So I can't think of a more important thing for me to be doing with my life right now. And that's the way the rest of my team feels. And, fortunately, it seems like there's a lot of interest in our product. And well, I'm heartened by that
Yeah.
as a selfish business founder, but also somebody who, I guess my old professor was right. I want to do some good while I'm doing well. So here we are.
That's great. Can we talk a little bit about ROI a little bit more, and maybe this AI paradox and why ROI in some cases is vanishing around that? Because we're seeing, as a problem, a lot of AI deployments are, potentially or are actually failing to generate ROI despite spending a lot of money on AI, right? So we see this convergence where like AI outputs are naturally converging towards sameness, which erodes brand differentiation or employee differentiation. So I guess, with your core premise that we shouldn't be against AI, but against AI done wrong. I think I've heard you say that before.
Yeah.
How does an over reliance on AI actually create strategic risk where companies end up looking identical to competitors?
Well, sort of it, some of it is really just business school 101, which is that businesses can only compete in one of two ways. You compete on efficiency or you compete on value. And so if you just start out with the understanding that um, if you're a business, you have to compete on both. Unless you're huge, if you have monopoly power, you can compete on efficiency because pricing power comes. But for everybody else, you have to compete ultimately on differentiation. And the problem with AI deployment in the absence of the Hupside measurement tool, which didn't exist 3 months ago, if you were a CFO or a CEO or anybody who was responsible for your value chain, the only thing you can really do is use AI as a measurement of efficiency and ultimately time saving. A labor substitution measurement. Because what AI really does, when you put everything else aside for the moment, it's a time generation device. It creates time. Things are more efficient. That's what it does. And so, in the absence of any sort of qualitative measurement of quality, what you fall back on is, basically who gets a benefit of the time saving. And that so far has been answered in a lot of enterprises by, work optimization, margin improvement. I need fewer people. It's the economics of it. The operational aspects, which are just becoming clear, is that AI at scale creates what you described, sameness. They're homogeneous engines. That's what they do. And they do that really well. That's where the efficiency comes from. So you now have two problems. You have the first problem, which is if AI is a time addition or a time management thing, um, do you need another measurement other than hours saved? Right. That's number one. And number two is if AI creates sameness at scale, do you need another measurement to actually measure outcomes? Right. And that's where Upside fits in so far as that, okay, if you want to measure time saved and you want to capture that time saved by letting people go, well, choose your own adventure. You better make sure that the people that are left are going to generate differentiation, right? The other hand, you're going to say, I've got a feeling that my people could use AI better if I understood my people better. And if I train them differently, or if I put them in teams where they work with each other, I could probably get more return, more productivity out of these people if I actually work them as part of an AI environment. In other words, I could create more hours of output without more hours of people, right? I could use the agents well to create more output. I could use my people to be on the phone when somebody's pissed off because the agents haven't come up with the right outcome. In other words, how do I increase my programmatic outcome efficiency? And so you can't train people if you don't understand them. We know from our models that only about 10% of your workforce are going to take AI tools and work with them naturally. They're expanders. Everybody else needs to be trained in a way that teaches them how to use AI as a way to amplify their originality. So you have to understand your people to train them better. You have to understand your people to match up expanders with focals to get better results. And I could go on. But the point is that the Hupchecker product today, used, for example, with your training programs at Skillbrex, right, or others, what it does today is it says, all right, I have AI. How do I actually make it work better with my people? That's what Hupchecker does today. It creates an attachment surface. You can train better. You can measure cognitive increases, cognitive decline. That's what it does today. 6 months or a year from now, we have the originality product. You'll be able to say, all right, did this output actually do anything other than give me AI slot?
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
that's the second part of the puzzle. And boy, when we get there, then I don't think that anybody in industry will have any excuse for not understanding their people and originality. There'll be no excuse because if you're not doing this, you're basically not measuring the true benefit of AI, which is ultimately what humans can do on top of AI, or what humans and AI can do together that's better than both.
Yeah, makes
That's
sense.
the mission. That's where we're running.
Yeah, and it almost seems like this just very effective like adoption. I guess I'm going to say the adoption efficacy of a particular company or a particular group. I just find it interesting how it may even influence things like like policy and whatnot within a company. Obviously, we have we were talking about a few weeks ago the kind of sans workforce sort of state of the world almost. and we were seeing there was this major squeeze in the top kind of senior leaders. And kind of doing a little bit of cross-examination of my own, it's, when we talk about the added workload that is expected because AI can kind of cut the give people some slack, they're actually finding that there's almost more of a crunch. And so it is, how effectively are we using, this particular, whatever AI LLM that they're using. Mm. And so, especially like just navigating the products, it was, I don't know, it was incredibly interesting to see the broader implications of how it could also affect like things like hiring, things like workforce cohesion, things of that sort. I was just wondering if we could actually go a little bit more into those kind of what do you call them? Those, not necessarily roles, those archetypes,
You
right?
know
You
what?
were talking about focals
Yeah,
and expanders and things of that sort. I was just wondering if you can kind of open that up a little bit more because it's
I'd be
very interesting stuff.
I'd be happy to. Before I do, though, I want to provide a little bit of context here because the reason why archetypes matter and the reason why people matter is because we've never, ever in the history of humankind introduced a tool like AI. Every other tool we've ever built, basically, we use the tool. The tool is static. You use a hammer, you use a computer, you use a wheel. It's static. It makes us better, but it's static. AI is the first technology we created that we actually create a feedback loop with. It improves us or denigrates us. It works alongside us. It reflects us. It reflects our society, the values, the bias. I mean, there's never been anything like it. And the problem is that we're deploying AI like every other tool. Here's AI. Use it. It's a hammer. It's not a hammer. It's something new. So this is why archetypes matter, because when we use a tool, we actually use it with intent. You can use a chisel to make a piece of sculpture. You can use a chisel to open up a door frame. You can use a chisel because you've got a really bad headache and you can't take it anymore. I mean, a tool is a tool is a tool. So if you understand that AI is a tool that creates a feedback loop, that means you need to understand the person who's using the tool, because how they use the tool is going to be reflected by how they think about using tools. So what we figured out is that originality is an objective outcome measurement. It's not creativity. Creativity can get you to originality, but so can instinct, so can good judgment, so can God speaking through your head. It doesn't matter. What matters is, did you do something that's different? Did you do something that AI couldn't do? That's what originality is. Well, we do that differently. Some people just create originality because they are just inherently unable to sit still. They just need to create new stuff all the time. Those are expanders. Focals are the other side of the spectrum. Focals are people who use their originality to solve the problems in front of them. That's just what they do. They're both creative in that they both have processes to get to an outcome. They just do it very differently. And between expanders and focals are two other personality types. One is a connector. Connectors like to be out of the edge sometimes, but they like to bring things back into the practical. They're sort of the connective glue in the organization between the expanders and the organization. And then down with the focals, or over here, the focals are augmenters. Augmenters like dealing with stuff on a daily basis, but they like tweaking things just a bit. They're more open to new things. So if you look at an organization of expanders, connectors, augmenters, and focals, what you have is groups of people that all solve problems, all have their winning strategy to solve problems, and all look at themselves as having the right way to solve problems. And now you're in a situation where you can say, all right, if I've got somebody who's off the wall, really hyper original, I better marry them up with somebody who's a connector. And I better make sure how to get the focals to understand what they're doing. Otherwise, I'm just going to have a bunch of new ideas out here that are never going to be useful. Then again, if I've got focals down here, they're never going to think of anything really, really novel. They're just going to keep processing, right? So the archetypes, the ability to segment people into these four different types, which have subtypes, gradations. So you end up with 10. It's a way to understand your people. It's a way to say, all right, well, you're a focal, cool. If I want you to use AI well, I'm going to have to do something other than yell at you. Because if I give it to you and yell at you and say use it, at best you're going to use it to get your job done. You're going to use it for efficiency, so you can go home. You're not going to be like, oh, Let me tweak my prompts. Let me use this as an assistant. No, I don't like that answer. So, whereas the expander is going to say, new tool? Cool. Can I set up my own personal sandbox and take all your IP and leak it out into Claude? Yeah, let's go. Because right? Because they don't think about that stuff. They're not focal, they're expanders. So we kind of laugh about it, but that's the point is if you don't understand your people and you just approach AI transformation as a here's a tool, use it, or worse, here's a tool, use it or else, it's not surprising to me that 95% of AI transformations are, quote, failing to generate ROI because roughly 90% of your people won't use the tool well unless you give them a reason to. So that's why the archetypes matter so much.
Yeah, it's again the tool with intent. I thought was interesting. You know, you walk into it using a tool with intent, but at the same time, this tool has an intention of its own, I guess, right? In a way, right? And there's that constant feedback loop. I'm just thinking about all the AI slop images and things. Like I don't know if you guys have seen, but they get progressively more and more yellow. At least on some of them, like there's like a yellow tint, right? And it continues to kind of mutate in that way. um, and so I just find that incredibly interesting. And also on top of that, when we talk about, because this provides a new metric for, say, just again, when we're talking about broad AI adoption, some people will track like tokens, for instance, being like, okay, if people are using AI effectively, it's because they're using it a lot. And so we're, seeing how many tokens they kind of are, doing. But at the same time, that can be incredibly flawed where it's this almost garbage in, garbage out, right? And that's just the name of the game when it comes to anything data. And so I do like that there's almost this greater sort of abstract, like it's, I don't know. I want to call it abstract, but again, because things are quantified, I can't necessarily say that. But there's this greater sort of meta that the metrics here provide that I personally, as a data guy, just love to see. And so, yeah, I really appreciate that because again, I was looking at the, and I think all of us here have taken the OIQ challenge, and so I was wondering because I thought it was like, oh, all of us want to be expanders or something like that, right? Just the bit like we all want to be the most novel and out there. And so I was a little disappointed. I think I got connector, augmenter, kind of like around there. Um, but so it's interesting to kind of see that it's not necessarily like one is better than the other, but it's just merely this form of, okay, how do we inform particular adoption strategies and stuff? And so, yeah, I'm just, the use cases are insane.
Look, I think you identified one of the really interesting challenges of a whole new paradigm, which is that there is no wrong answer to learning what your original intelligence quotient is. There's no wrong answer, but yet when so it's fascinating. I'll tell you, I've done a lot, with people where they use it while I watch. We talk about it. The first thing that's fascinating is how accurate this thing is. I rarely have somebody say, "No, no, that's not me." Sometimes people say, "Nah, I want to try again," and their score will change. Usually, what happens is people who think of themselves as hyper creative are disappointed, and then they actually bear down and they change their score, and they're like, "Yeah, I'm creative." It's like, you just tried harder. That's great. You were able to. I've had people that are really focal and they say, no, I don't like my score. And say, oh, try again. And damn, I got the same score. Well, how did you approach it? Well, I tried to find the most clear and obvious answer to me. I was like, exactly, exactly. This works. But the problem is that we're so used to living in a society where numbers are destiny. What's your IQ? It's your IQ forever. This is not that. This is in a particular moment in time, under particular conditions, when you were asked to apply your originality, this is what it looked like. You don't like it? Okay, you know what? Spend some time thinking and learning how to be more expansive if you feel like you should be more expansive, or maybe it's okay. Or maybe in other words, this is a training tool. This is not your score forever. It'll change over time. The other thing is an analogy that I use, and you're a musician, well, you're a guitarist too, and so am I. The best analogy I can give is, you mentioned, Eddie Van Halen or Jimi Hendrix never took a guitar lesson in their lives, revolutionized the genre, revolutionized it. They played like nobody else. But when I go to a really good bar and I hear a really good bar band guitarist, that guy is playing Hendrix note for note. The sound is absolutely perfect. they're being creative as well, or being, but it's different kind of, they're focal. They're like, I'm going to get the right distortion pedal. I'm going to get the right amp. I'm going to get the Strat. I'm going to phase wire the pickups and whatever it takes. I sound exactly like Hendrix. It's still originality. It's just different type. And this is why we're talking about originality and not creativity, because creativity has the stigma that if you're creative, you're Van Gogh, and you can't be creative and be a really, really good person working at an Apple store. And the answer is you can be a great person to work in an Apple store and solving people's problems and be Van Gogh, you know, if you talk about it as output instead of creativity.
Yeah, and I feel like I'm taking up a lot of the airtime, so
Well,
apologies
in
to
fairness,
Jeff and
Will,
Sasha.
AI is kind of in your zone. So yeah, go for
Yeah,
it, and let's get
yeah,
the good doctor in here after you.
yeah. Well, so man, I was about to say something. What was I about to say? Oh my gosh. Okay, well then we're gonna get Sasha in this. I'm like for a second there was something right there that I had that
I broke the thought process on you,
no, it's okay,
and
it's
broke
okay.
the whole AI system that you have going on in your head there, Will.
I
Yeah.
knew what you're going to say would have freaked you out, though. So, yeah. Anyway,
Yeah.
Sasha, you
anyway,
want to weigh in?
Yeah, no, I mean, I definitely just agree. And I think for me, it's just so interesting. I think like to your point that it's trying to be able to like understand your workforce better. And I think that's what really excites me about this tool is I think, with any kind of learning or training and things like that, understanding how people think, how they solve problems, how they create problems, how they just, are able to think about things and their ideas and where that comes from. And if you have a better understanding of that, I think not only, for using AI, but I think it just can apply to so many different areas, especially like in the work that we do with skills-based training and career pathways and things like that. This is just another great piece of data that you can apply and use it in so many different ways as you are trying to not only do your job and do it well, but thinking about what your career growth looks like and, what projects I should be involved in, or, what does that next position look like for me? Or maybe if I am unhappy in the team that I'm at, maybe it's looking at another team and looking for a lateral move and thinking about it more about how you think and how you approach things and the tools that you're using, especially AI, but it applies in so many different ways that it's just exciting to I love learning about that kind of stuff. I was a psych undergrad major, so like thinking about how you think and all that kind of stuff is fascinating to me. So I thought my results were pretty spot on as well.
yeah, I'm glad to hear you say that. I'm also glad that you've positioned this thing as what it really is, which is it's a change management organizational development
Mhm.
tool. You know, I've backed a lot of entrepreneurs over my life and taught entrepreneurship at a lot of different universities. And the one thing I always say is that entrepreneurs start business to solve the problems they see. And I've been
Mm.
in change management and leadership for a long while. And what I realized was that in the world of AI, there's unbelievable signal collapse. I mean, they're literally every tool that's currently being used by all the consultants and all the people, well-meaning people, to try to understand the teams are all broken now. They're all obsolete because the LLMs have ingested them all. So if you want to get a good IQ score, you can prep. If you want to get a good Myers, whatever good Myers-Briggs is, if you want, all you have to do is have the opportunity to ask the LLM what the right answer is, and it'll tell you. You've got that. Then you add on top of that the way that people are using AI for their applications. So there's this a work slop is not just a problem in the workforce. Work slop is a problem on LinkedIn. It's a problem in interviews, on and on and on. So what this tool does is it basically measures people's performance against AI, so that if somebody gives you a response that's not a quote original, what that means is that it's basically mimicking what you get out of an LLM. If somebody's score is focal, that doesn't mean it's good or bad, but it does mean that they're going to have to figure out how to raise the bar, or they're going to have to figure out how to be really, really good, because they're clustering with AI performing the same baseline task. So um, you're absolutely right. When I've done change management, I've always realized that if you've got 100 people, you've got 10 that are with you right away because they want to change things, maybe 20. You got 30 or 40 that just want you to just go away and die so they can be left alone. And you got the people in the middle that are your battleground. Well, if you run our product, you'll see that people pretty much separate that way. It's roughly 10 or so are expanders, roughly 30 to 40 are focals, and the people in between. So successful change management is getting the expanders on your team right away, getting the connectors involved, but bringing those focals in as fast as you can so that they feel like they have a reason to participate, which is why connectors and augmenters are so important. But yeah, you basically have identified the dirty secret, which is AI is just the biggest organizational change management project in history. That's what it is. It's not a technology problem, it's a people problem. And the sooner we figure that out, the sooner that we'll get ROI out of AI.
Love that. Can you talk a little bit more, Jonathan, about because we've experienced the product. We're a partner of yours. For those who haven't seen it, can you talk a little bit about OIQ? A little bit about that score, how you compare individuals to other individuals, how you compare to models. And then I also want you to expand upon a little bit about some of the other things you're asking people too. And I'm really referencing like how much autonomy you have. So if can you wrap all that up into one
Nice.
cohesive thing?
There'll be a test later. So you start with the fundamental technology, which is it's a large language model that my scientists have built that instead of embedding data to pull it back together, it embeds data and measures the distances and the clustering. So you create an idea space. And that the idea space basically is all the potential answers you've seen for a particular concept. Ideas tend to cluster. People tend things to cluster. So whether it's a piece of content that, you're plotting or it's people, they cluster. And that's what commonality does. And so the more that something diverges, the more it's original, the more it's different. So once you have that inference, then you do different things with it. So the first thing we're doing was to say, all right, well, let's get an idea space put together where a bunch of people answer the same question. And in this case, it's a series of challenges, fun games for people to play that answer a common question, like you just met a talking cow. What do you ask it? Or how do you preserve a good mood when you get up in the morning? And you ask people to put, 300 to 500 words in that, and that is enough for a model to then basically take that and plot it against a bunch of other answers. And then we can measure who's clustered and who's divergent, who's different. The clustering and divergence is mathematically expressed as something called the original intelligence quotient. And that is a mathematical figure that's measured of your divergence. Now, because we all live in an AI world, rather than just measuring people against other people, which we could do, let's get the real elephant in the corner out of the table. What do we all care about these days? How do I do against AI? Great. When you answer those questions, you're going to an idea space where AI has been asked the same question. All the large language models have been asked the same question. So that when you go into the idea space, you're being compared for your OIQ against the clustering of AI sameness, but also when AI is divergent. So do you outperform AI when it's being sane? Do you outperform AI when it's trying to be original? Because AI does try to be original. We call that hallucinations, right? But it is trying to be original. So the OIQ is a composite of those two things. So then you can take an OIQ score and you can say, all right, well, Jonathan got a 300, Jeff got a 100. So I compare the two of you, right? The two of us. Then we take the OIQ score and we map that into these 10 archetypes. So that gives you typography, right? So then the other part you mentioned is once you have that, you'd have to ask the question of, well, if you know somebody's originality capability, how free are they to exercise it? Because you need to know that for things like team building, um, hiring, um, promotion, not promotion, governance, risk management. I could go on, right? Autonomy really matters. So when we onboard somebody, when they play one of these games, we ask them some questions about their current job title and their supervisor relationships and their perceived level of autonomy. And what's interesting is that you can take those scores and you can get an idea of how much autonomy that person has in the role. And the reason why that matters is somebody might have a lot of autonomy in their role, and you might say, wait a minute, I don't want to have that much autonomy. or they don't have a lot of autonomy in their role. And you're like, wait a minute, I thought I designed an organization where that person should have a lot of autonomy. So there must be something wrong. Going to Dr. Vanterpool's observation, knowing if I've got organizational constraints, it's just as important as knowing who my people are. So when you pull back and you're somebody who's trying to understand an organization, if you know people's OIQ, if you know their archetype, you know the level of accountability or autonomy they have in their role and what their perceived role autonomy is, you now have a full suite of things. So you can triangulate training, you can build teams, you can do governance, you can do risk assessment, all around an individual. So for the first time, AI is not being done to me. AI is part of my life experience with the company that cares about me. And that's so important. That's the part that's missing right now. People feel like AI is being done to them instead of AI being done with them. And as we know, and I know Sasha knows better than anybody, servant leadership, which is the way you lead an agile organization, starts with acknowledgement and delegation of authority to get it back. And that's what AI needs, and that's what Hupside does, is it lets an informed leader say, all right, well, Will, Will's a connector. Will's my AI guy. Will's a connector. I can feel comfortable that if I turn Will loose and he's going to come up with new stuff, he's going to bring it back to the team. I don't need to spend a lot of time making sure Will understands that he's working for us. My biggest challenge is going to be giving him a freedom so he can make the associations. Jonathan is a focal. Jonathan is incredibly useful. I put him in a role where he comes to work every day and he gets stuff done. If I put him in an innovation cell and say, figure out what our customer wants, it's going to look at me like I have three heads. And the leader who understands what Jonathan needs, what Will needs, is a great leader. And a leader who doesn't care is an authoritarian leader, which is great in a command and control organization. But we all know that most innovative organizations are not command control. They're servant led.
Great
And here we
point.
are.
Yeah. And I think that's just gonna add to, like you said, the employees are gonna feel like they not only are cared about and supported, but they're gonna see that they're valued for the uniqueness that they do bring to the table. And I think it's gonna allow for better community building within their teams and other teams, and just being able to, again, have that insight about who your people are. It's just it's a game changer, really.
Well, it's a game changer. But the other thing about it is, and I think this is sort of where we are at this moment in time, um, I think that there is a viewpoint among many who are promoting AI transformation that ultimately, because they're going to be fewer jobs, you don't really need to worry about how people feel. You just don't need to worry about it because at the end of the day, the people that are happy are going to be happy. You don't have to worry about that. That's something to worry about. You don't worry about that. And I think the reality is that the reason we're going to have to worry about it is you're going to have to worry about it more, not less, because AI is going to create commoditization, and people value novelty. They value it in what they consume, they value it in what they do, they value it in how they feel, and ultimately business differentiation is going to come from people, and social differentiation is going to come from people, and everything. If you don't focus on getting your people engaged, you're ultimately going to fail as a business unless you are a monopoly that competes on commodity pricing. And you know, that's great. But I haven't heard anybody explain to me how capitalism works if everything is just a commodity. I'm sorry. Maybe, maybe this is just, maybe this is socialism after all. But capitalism requires differentiation, and differentiation is going to come from people.
Yep.
Yeah.
Will, did it come back to you?
Well, yeah, I was because now you got me thinking about socioeconomic systems, and that's but kind of reeling back a little bit into the, because I'm talking about thinking about these metrics, these measurements, and I was thinking about, is this just a assessment on almost pragmatism in a way where like focals are highly pragmatic while like expanders may be like so I actually was kind of probing the OIQ challenge a few times. So I kept like doing, and I was like, okay, so because again, it would talk about, I think the one that I got was you're on a deserted island and you find this box and there's a blender inside, and like what can you use with it, right? Like how can you you know adapt it into a tool or adapt it? Like, how would you use it on this deserted island? And the prompt was asking specifically for the blender, but I realized that if I just stopped kind of like, I'm going to say addressing the parameters in a way, right? And like, so I was like, I'm actually going to think about how it works with the box now too, right? Or something like that. I would actually see that my, originality would kind of go, a little bit more. And so, maybe expanders have like this acknowledgement or lack thereof of obstacles, which is what makes them, very kind of innovative minds, stuff of that sort. I was just kind of interested to see, or, it was just kind of more of an anecdote about like, oh, there's this interesting behavior that OIQ kind of has where it's not only just a deviation from like, I guess, AI and stuff like that, but it's how much you adhere to like a particular prompt or whatever. I even tried to put like some like just junk entries in and stuff like that. And it was just like, it was very interesting. If I made it just completely bizarro or something like that, it was like, well, it's deviating, but it's not telling us much kind of thing. Right. So it
Well,
was very, yeah.
yeah, what's really interesting is that um, I find that we tend to look at these things and we tend to, Rorschach ink block tests, which is something that, people are really used to working with. It's all what you see, right? And somehow we tend not to think about originality type things in the same way. But the point is that it's a tell, and how we work through problems is a tell, and what you did is a tell for how you approach these things. That's what I mean. There's no right or wrong answer. It's more, how do you approach things? I had a funny situation a couple weeks ago where a good friend of mine took the test, and she came out and she was an augmenter. She was like, "There's no way I'm an augmenter." I said, "Well, okay." She took it again. She's like, "No, I'm an augmenter." I said, "All right." She said, I'm not an augmenter." And so then she sat down and she's like, she came with all the obvious response you could possibly think of, and then came up with completely different answers, and that she was an expander, that she was happy. And I said, "Okay, you just basically you made my argument." She's like, "Well, that's fine. I got a square leg." Okay. But the other part about it, though, that's really important, Will, is what the other thing our technology does is we don't evaluate whether an answer is good or bad. We just evaluate whether or not it's original. The assessor looks at the answer and can decide whether or not it's acceptable. So if somebody just puts gibberish in, the model isn't designed to say, "Oh, that's gibberish," or not. The assessor says, "Oh, that's gibberish. Do it again."
Yeah, exactly. Because I was, even some of the mock like dashboards that, you could kind of see on like the product section of the site. There's even things of like, oh, status, like they're open. And then I'm assuming there's, things like, oh, hey, you might see somebody like type in just completely, whatever. Because again, if you ask any, broad workforce, hey, here's an assessment, they'll like, maybe like 20% of people are just gonna be like, oh, whatever, right? And so I do kind of like that where, we can kind of go back, we can review that kind of stuff. And again, for me, I'm looking at the kind of the strategic angle and being like, well, okay, if I had like, I don't know, a budget for 10 people, what kind of archetypes would I be looking for it as a distribution in there, right? Like, am I looking for 2 expanders and then I'm looking for like 4 focals and then I'm going for, like augmenters and connectors there? Like, I don't know, just there's a lot of very fun brain exercises there. And again, for me, I'm very interested in, when we kind of look at the cybersecurity angle, AI adoption is almost a must in a lot of different areas. And again, you might want to be more of an expander or something if you're red teaming versus like, hey, you're, I don't know, like GRC or something like that, right? Yeah. That's going to be more focal, right? And so part of me goes and, it kind of is a little bit of my, this week I learned, but talking about Anthropic's mythos model, being like, how are people going to kind of use that? Because again, it is a prompt based sort of deal. It's an incredible model, but there's going to be, that originality component that, kind of is going to show, okay, who's taking the most advantage in this adoption that could go really haywire really quickly.
So I think that is a good segue, Will. And since you're kind of on the Anthropic train there, why don't you go ahead and continue on and let's share your This Week I Learned.
Yeah. So, well, they're doing a lot of people in, like just tech at large, or, finance, or just, I don't know, anyone who's looking at the news, is probably seeing this and going, oh my God, this is insane. Again, there were emerging behaviors, with this model that they made. Again, Anthropic's Mythos model, that they didn't necessarily plan for. It just kind of happened, which is very interesting and almost gives like a lightning in the bottle effect of like, okay, well, if people try to replicate this, like say another like competitor or something, it's going to be a little difficult, maybe. Especially because behavioral insight into AI models is very, kind of all over the place. There's no like standardized methodology for it. But yeah, so they announced Project Glasswing, which is going to be a few, critical, I'm going to say like AI allies, but then also like, there's JP Morgan and Chase, there's Cisco, there's CrowdStrike, right? Kind of I'm going to say a sizable coalition of companies that are essentially working on, system hardening and things of that sort. And part of me, again, with the This Week I Learned, was looking into the broader implications of that and being like, well, how is this? Because eventually they have this desire to bring the model to the fore and be like, people can use it, right? Is it going to be something where, when we had those kind of old school fuzzers that kind of went large scale and all of a sudden there's mass adoption and they thought it was going to, break a lot of things and all that stuff, but it actually became a really good tool for, systems hardening? Is it going to be something like that? Is it going to be more chaotic? Because again, the model itself, as like we talked about, has kind of an intent of its own, and it has, there's that feedback loop. So I don't know. For me, I'm like, there's a lot of things up in the air right now, and I think this originality is going to be a big portion of, or have a big effect, right? And it almost kind of, I'm going to say, I don't know, strengthens the need for being able to engage or gauge originality and stuff like that, just from even what's happened in the last 2 weeks. So yeah, that's my spiel. I promise I'm done
No,
now.
no,
I
it's
promise I'm
great.
done now.
Great.
But
Sasha, do you want to take it next, and then I'll go, and we'll let
Yeah,
Jonathan weigh in at
yeah.
the end.
So I think for yeah, I think for me, it was actually just taking the Hupside assessment. So my results were a focal augmenter, and I think it really resonated how I tend to work, and just how I naturally kind of focus on structuring ideas and building them and making them actionable and focusing on trying to solve problems and kind of seek clarity and stuff like that. Um, so I think that like for me though, now being aware of that, it is making me think about how I can use AI differently and how I can use it better to kind of, coincide with that way of thinking. And I think that also just thinking about the work that we do with skills-based learning and training and just workforce development in general, and thinking about, okay, like how can we take this into consideration a little bit more with thinking about like, okay, we talk about the skills, we talk about competencies and what people have, but it's like, okay, how can we try and implement how people are thinking and how are they using the tools like AI that they do use on their day and their work and their work role, and how the archetypes align to the work roles or the functional areas that they're in. So I think it just really sparked a lot of ideas for me and thinking about just how we could, incorporate that in the literal like work that we do at SkillRex. So it was very insightful.
Well, thank you for sharing that. For me, this week I learned. So I just saw a really great video done by Josh Madakor, who's the title of the YouTube video is 100 Cybersecurity and AI Jobs Analyzed. So basically, he went on Indeed, took 100 or so postings that were requiring cybersecurity jobs that had an AI component to it, and analyzed all that data. And I think some of his findings were really interesting, right? So some of the skill sets that were required in those job postings, we're looking at languages, computer languages, probably no surprise that 48% of those required Python, significantly higher than the rest of them, where you see like Java at 20%, Go at 15, and JavaScript at 12, and it kind of goes down. Another interesting point that we was able to extract from that data was the cloud platforms that they were requiring experience on. Azure was at the top of it at 44%. AWS was kind of behind that, 38, followed by GCP, 30. But one of the really interesting pieces, and this kind of maybe tied back to our last episode with Brian Correa at Sands and their workforce report, was the seniority distribution of these jobs that were requiring AI skills. And the distribution of that was 37% of mid-level jobs, and 25% were senior jobs, and 17% were staff or principal. Lead manager and director were really kind of nominal. Entry or junior level, there was only 7%. So that's really interesting. And the point he was making about that was that it's probably because it's cybersecurity and AI, where you kind of need a little more technical chops on the cybersecurity side there to kind of integrate that in there. So that was kind of an interesting piece. A couple other data points to share on the AI and machine learning skills demand. Machine learning, AI governance were the top two at 57, 50%, respectively, followed by AI agents or agentic, which was 40% of those job postings required that. And it goes down the list to LLMs, generative AI, RAG, prompt engineering, etc. And then the last point I'll make, because I could talk about it all day long, there's a bunch of good stats in here, but when we're looking at emerging skills, AI agents and agentic was the top emerging skill at 40%, rising there, followed by RAG. Our RAG architecture at 23%. Just some really interesting points and things to think about as you're kind of looking at how is AI affecting cybersecurity and the skills that we need as an industry or profession as we're doing more AI adoption on the more core AI skill sets. So that's what I learned this week. Jonathan, turn it over to you for the last word.
My last word is I think that I learned basically a synthesis of what the three of you discussed, which is that the world's moving so darn fast. And what we saw with this most recent model announcements for Anthropic, and just the Anthropic's battle with the Pentagon, or just the fact that we're talking about agentic AI, we weren't talking about any of that stuff 6 or 8 months ago or a year ago. And now we're talking about a model that was so incredibly dangerous, they actually have held it off the market for the time being. It sounds like Skynet to me. And so we need tools to be able to surface as fast as possible what our role as humans is going to be in this world. Because I think that if we don't do that, then it's dangerous, but it's also dehumanizing. And if we are dehumanized, then I think that ultimately erodes society, and it erodes stability, and erodes a lot of things. People want to feel special. People want to feel acknowledged. And when they don't feel that, no good thing happens anywhere. So to me, I think that if I cared about my company 2 weeks ago, I care about it more now. So then what's the other lesson I learned? Every day I learned that entrepreneur time is faster than lifetime. It's like, I want this thing to be ubiquitous last week, and it's not how it happens. And every night I have to remind myself that it's a marathon, not a sprint. But geez, it's hard sometimes.
That's great.
That's the lesson I learned every day.
Valuable, very valuable. All right. Well, that's a wrap for episode 2. A huge thanks to Jonathan Aberman for helping us find the human upside in an AI-driven world. If you're a leader wondering why your AI strategy isn't yielding the ROI you expected, it might be time to stop looking at the software and start measuring the originality of your people. You can learn more about Jonathan's work and the Hupchecker tool at hupside.com, as well as on their LinkedIn company page. As we wrap up today, we're already looking ahead to the rest of season 2. We have some incredible conversations in the works, so keep an eye on our social channels for updates. In the meantime, follow me, my co-host on LinkedIn, follow the SkillRex company page for the latest workforce intelligence, and subscribe to our YouTube channel so you never miss an episode. Until next time, keep investing in your people. They're the heart of cyber resilience and the key to your original advantage. We'll see you next time on The Matrix.